Yet today, I taught a message called Living the Gospel in Everyday Life. Obviously, it's possible to hit the whole message, but I wanted to hit one thing in particular, keeping in mind we've been studying the book of Titus, and it's written by Paul, who was he started out being a Christian serial killer. Eventually, he was converted to Christianity. And became the biggest proponent of Christianity in the early church. He wrote close to 3/4 of the New Testament, and Paul is writing to a young man, Titus, who is in charge of some home churches or groups in Crete. Titus was known as a guy that was a pretty tough guy. He was strong in his faith. He had been tested in some really hard situations that he was put in with Paul, especially if you're looking at 1st and 2nd Corinthians, with things that were going on in that church that were just not healthy. And so Paul sets Titus in Crete to help manage these churches and get them to a healthier place, because Crete was just not a very healthy place at all. It was full. In fact, their own poets called them liars and thieves in Crete. So it was definitely not a healthy environment. And so in the first week, we talked about elders and leaders, about how important it is for them to have integrity with this really high standard. We also talked about how, Paul wanted good, solid leaders in place, because there were leaders that were put in place that were actually leading people away from God, and how us as Christians, we can have those good, strong qualities too. Then we dug into the second message, was more specifically about growing in Christ, and how we were actually going to do that. Some really great encouragement there. And then today, basically based off of the culture, and I know it's a little bit different because our culture is different today. It was a little awkward actually preaching this message today. I felt like I was battling through some stuff a little bit. People struggling to connect, because it was talking about, older men need to do these kinds of things, younger men need to do these kinds of things, older women need to do these kinds of things, and younger women need to do these kinds of things, along with bond servants. Keeping in mind, too, that back then, the women pretty much worked from their homes. They were in charge of the house. They were in charge of the kids. Our society today is a lot different. It's very difficult for anyone to have a household where both people aren't working. Things are more shared, that's for sure. I do a lot of things in my home that back then in that culture would be considered things that women do. And there are a lot of things that my wife does that back in that culture they would say that men would do. But just because those roles are a little bit different doesn't mean that this message doesn't apply. Right. And I think that when I go back over it Sunday, I'm really going to hit that hard, because I think that's what people are struggling with a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. This culture is so different than what I'm used to. How do I apply this? And I think that if we're not careful, we get caught up in the little boxes that we put ourselves into, and we forget the big picture of what God is really trying to say. It's interesting, because you're a preacher, Nigel, that when you preach messages, you actually learn a lot from the messages you preach.
Yeah.
And I enjoy doing this and even Faith Talks, because there's a lot I learned from preaching that message on Sunday that I can't communicate on a Sunday morning, because I'm learning it as I'm doing it, And so that's kind of one thing. But what I wanted to hit really quickly tonight, I know that we're running out of time, was what he said to older men, which is in Titus 2, verse 2. He says, "But the older men, be sober, be reverent, temperate, sound in faith, in love, in patience, called to be sober-minded, dignified, and self-controlled." I wanted to check out that Greek word sephron, which actually means self-controlled or disciplined. I talked about how Proverbs 16:32 says, "He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules a spirit than he who takes a city." It takes a lot of might to take a city. It takes a lot of strength to hold back our anger, and self-control is a powerful thing, and it allows us to be and if we have self-control, we can be thoughtful, we can be more open and respond to how we're feeling instead of just reacting. And I think for me, when I hear about self-control, that's what jumps out at me the most. Not just when it comes to anger. It's like I think of my my time right now is very structured because I'm preaching a lot. Right now I'm preaching 2 messages every week. I just got done doing a discipleship class that I actually wrote, which is going to be hopefully turned into a small book. And then finally, I don't know if you heard it or not, but I'm the team director at Family Camp. I've got 10 messages that I've got to have done in 4 weeks. So I'm studying a lot. And I've had to be really, really structured and self-controlled with my time. And I find that and I mentioned this morning, if I get up early in the morning, and I do this anyway, and structure my time, I'm not reacting to all the crazy things that are happening around me. I'm responding to what I'm supposed to do that day, and I feel pretty well prepared.
Right.
So I think that when we build those self-control, they immediately run to anger. But it really applies to a lot of self-control with a lot of different things. Self-control for me would be, eating. Self-control with me would be exercise. Self-control with me would be, my mouth and being, having a filter, that kinds of thing. When I was sharing this morning, anything jump out at you?
Not really, but
Yeah.
I mean, I got to be really self-controlled too, because I do the radio job, and then I do my other job, and I got to do notes for that, and I got 6 guys. I gotta manage the time to when to do the notes, when to get the shows done. If I don't have a radio show done for Sunday night, then there's you always want to give a good quality stuff and bring out stuff that people will be interested in, and you got to be structured with your time. So that kind of spoke to me, and I think that I do a good job most of the time. And I've learned that when I put it off, I add stress to my life.
Yeah, sure.
So you don't want to put it off. You got to be, when you're not structured and you're like being procrastination is not a good thing for having you got to have self-control not to procrastinate, to make yourself do it. Sometimes you may say, you know what, if I just do a little bit of this, if I just do this for like half an hour before bed and then, get this done, then I don't have to worry about to do it quite as much in the morning, and it's putting less stress on the morning.
Absolutely.
So every little thing you can do in the course of the day that you have time to do. And also if you're structured well, it'll open more time for yourself. And you'll have more time to do other things that you'll enjoy, with spending time with family or listening to your own music or watching a movie or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. So true. All right, we got a song we got to get into, and then you have a top 10 coming up. What's your top 10?